Bernie Sanders. Like most Old Reds and Marxists, Bernie Sanders hates his country. Can you tell me one speech he's ever given that has been pro-American? One speech he's ever given that's been pro-founding fathers? One speech he's ever given in defense of the United States Constitution? One speech he's ever given in defense of private property rights? All of these and others are principles of the American founding. One speech. You can't find one. Not one. And yet I can give you speeches and statements he's made in defense of the old Soviet Union, which is responsible for murdering tens of millions. I can point to you his support for the communist regime in Nicaragua. Even went to Nicaragua in the 1980s. I believe it was the 7th anniversary of the communist regime there, in support of the communist regime. It's back, by the way, killing people and shutting down newspapers. Bernie Sanders calls that democracy. Bernie Sanders refuses to call for the removal of Maduro. He supported Chavez. Doesn't talk about that much anymore, does he? And he's been a long-time supporter of what he calls Cuba. That's right, Cuba. Even today. No, he doesn't support the nasty stuff that goes on in Cuba. They have a wonderful literacy program in Cuba. But what good is literacy if you can't speak freely and you can't write freely? He doesn't really mean a literacy program. He means a propaganda program, so you learn how to chant the same thing. This is Bernie Sanders. Our healthcare system sucks. The communist healthcare system is great. They have free education. If you call that education, we should have free education. Of course. They build up their military, paramilitary, militia forces. We should disarm unilaterally. Of course. Because we're the colonialist imperialists, wouldn't you know? And, of course, Bernie Sanders does the rich versus poor stuff. But what he doesn't tell you is when you look at Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in the Soviet Union, all the people suffer. The communal system requires everybody to give up their property, their homes, their farms, their wealth, whether it be meager or enormous. Everybody is to be the same, except, of course, implement these genius plans. And you must shut down all forms of resistance. Is there a communist regime that doesn't? Whether it's newspapers, radio, television, or the internet? Name one. There's not one. But Bernie Sanders was very impressed with the subways in the Soviet Union and the artwork. And he thinks it's very unfair when you talk about bread lines. At least they have bread, he says. So it's good they have lines. At least they have bread. Some places there's no bread, so there's no lines, you see. It's a stupid old man, really. And like most Marxists, of course, they hate America. Because America is the pinnacle, is the bulwark against Marxism. Is there another? So you must attack America, a big, complex, diverse society. You must find the areas of imperfection in lives, in the lives of others, in every institution you're aware of, let alone a big institution. Every single person doesn't go to college who wants to go. So we have to nationalize it. Every single person doesn't get the doctor they want when they want it, so we have to pretend they can under the Bernie Sanders program. And it can all be paid for. Don't bother with the math. It can all be paid for. Just steal as much as you possibly can from the people who invent things, create things, hire people. Just take it from them. Legalize massive wealth redistribution and stealing. And if you're a Marxist and you hate America, there's another country you hate too. It's called Little Israel. Go. And this is why I'm attacked so viciously through the lies and propaganda of Media Matters and Mediaite who stand with anti-Semites and bigots against yours truly. Is there any debating that Lynn's an anti-Semite and a bigot? Or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib, and yet they're all surrogates for Bernie Sanders. And he likes them and wants them to be his surrogates. And there are many more, many more. Sanders attracts anti-Semites and bigots. If Donald Trump did, or any Republican candidate did, you'd never hear the end of it. Be all over the Constipated News Network and MSLSD. But they hide it. Why do they hide it? There's many Jewish people who work at these networks. Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper. There are others. Same with CNN. Yet they hide it. You look at Media Matters, funded by billionaires and millionaires and reprobates of all income strata. Why would they stand with Bernie Sanders and Linda Sarsour and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and attack little old me with their cherry-picked sentences and headlines? Why would Mediaite, which is founded by Dan Abrams, a Jewish fella, come to the defense of the bigots and the anti-Semites in defense of Bernie Sanders? Shouldn't we all be talking out about this? Shouldn't we all be speaking out about this? See, Bernie Sanders is leading the Democrat PAC for nomination for President of the United States. And while I was out of the country, I tweeted and posted on Facebook to you, my fellow conservatives, don't celebrate this man, even with tongue-in-cheek, as the potential nominee of the Democrat Party, which is the biggest political party in the country. Don't defend him against the Democratic establishment like we give a damn about either. When you see evil, and Bernie Sanders is evil, Marxism is evil, bigotry and anti-Semitism is evil, when you see it, you fight it. You don't look for political advantage. And you don't wring your hands, oh, the establishment's out to get Bernie Sanders. Who cares? Good. Be far better if the Democrat Party were in fact a moderate party. So we weren't scared to death should the Democrat Party succeed. That's not what we stand for, is it? No, it's not. Bernie Sanders on 60 Minutes Sunday, cut 15, go.
Your stump speech, your critics say, sounds like nothing works in America, hasn't for generations. Is America great?
In many ways, we are. In some ways, very significant ways, we're not.
Stop.
We're not.
Well, give us 10 ways we are. He just moves on to the ways we're not. Give us 10 ways we are. That was the follow-up. Go ahead.
When half of our people today are living paycheck to paycheck. When 500,000 people tonight are going to be sleeping out on the streets.
All right, stop. If 500,000 people are sleeping on the streets, that means 320 million are not. And some of the people who are sleeping on the streets are drug addicts, are mentally ill, who've been released from courts from mental institutions, really since the Nixon administration, and a federal judge in Massachusetts, particularly in Boston, ordered their release. It's nothing to do with America or the American system. People make their own decisions in many respects. We have massive safety net programs, massive. And not just the feds, the state and local governments too. We're going broke paying for them. And if Bernie Sanders really feels this way, why does he favor open borders and endless migration of immigrants from other countries who are poor into this country, who take the jobs of American citizens? His policies make no sense. In fact, they're counterintuitive. People living paycheck to paycheck. Well, some people are, some people aren't. Some people save their money, some people don't. But we have a fired up economy right now, even with the drop in the stock market, which has nothing to do with the president's economic decisions. A lot of what happens in the stock market, particularly right now with the coronavirus, is psychological. We'll get to the coronavirus in the last hour because I want to address it in my way. But rather than saying 500,000 people tonight are going to sleep on the streets, why don't you say 320 million people are going to sleep in their homes? Why don't you mention that? Why don't you mention that we're doing better in this country than in any other country on the planet? Why don't you mention that? Go ahead.
Including 30,000 veterans. You know, my father came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. Couldn't speak a word of English, had very limited education.
Yes, so? Cut 16, go.
Syria is explaining why the Cuban people didn't rise up and help the U.S. overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro.
He educated the kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
That's not what happened. They were slaughtering people to make sure they wouldn't rise up. Lawyers, teachers, professors, doctors, as well as farmers, merchants, anybody who wouldn't join the revolution, anyone who was considered a threat, anybody who ratted on anybody was executed or thrown into a gulag. Women were raped, were tortured. That's why they didn't rise up. Not because he gave them health care and he educated their children. This is a very, very demented, sick man who constantly defends communism, constantly proclaims communism, and then is offended when you call him a communist, as are his supporters. Well, he's a red. He's an old-time Marxist. That's exactly what he is. Anyone who can defend the impoverished, inhumane conditions in Cuba, he talks about people going to sleep on our streets. The vast majority of people in Cuba are dirt poor. They live on rations. They don't get health care. Real health care, not health insurance. Go ahead.
To the authoritarian nature of Cuba. But, you know, it's unfair to simply say everything is bad. You know, when Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing? Even though Fidel Castro did it?
There's a lot of dissidents imprisoned in Cuba.
That's right, and we condemn that. Unlike Donald Trump.
Actually, you didn't condemn that. You don't condemn Cuba. You don't condemn Venezuela. You don't condemn Nicaragua. You went down there and celebrated it. You celebrated the Soviet Union. Who the hell do you think you're fooling? You're almost 80 years old. You have a whole record of being a Marxist reprobate. An entire record. Volume after volume with your big mouth. All you have to do is go on the internet. It's all there. It's all there. Along with his anti-Semitic, bigoted buddies all around him. It's all there on the internet. And he moves quickly to attack Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump has anything to do with this. Anything whatsoever to do with this. Defend yourself, you coward. Be honest, you coward. Tell the truth about what you believe and who you are and what you would do to this magnificent country, you coward. Try to do it without mentioning Donald Trump. But he's not dumb. He's not done. Said a CNN town hall meeting last night, which nobody watches, with Fredo Cuomo. Cut 17, go.
Now, Democrats who represent Cuban Americans in Florida, obviously you got to win there. They're attacking your comment as absolutely unacceptable, singing the praises of a murderous tyrant. Response.
The response was when Fidel Castro first came to power, which was when? 59? Does that sound right?
59-60.
Okay.
He knows when the hell it was. The revolution was in 59. Go ahead.
He initiated a major literacy program. There was a lot of folks in Cuba at that point who are literate.
Well, a lot of people in Cuba now are literate, but they're not allowed to speak. They're not allowed to write, or they'll be shot. So that's his defense. Is that his defense of Mao Zedong too? Hey, we know he killed tens of millions of people. Oh, yeah. The Great March Forward, the 5-year plan, starving people to death, locking them up, gulags, mass executions. But at least they were literate. Is that his argument? For the Soviet Union, the Third Reich? What is it? They had a literacy program? What an idiot. Go ahead.
The Literacy Brigade, you may read that. They went out.
No, I don't remember the Literacy Brigade. I remember indoctrination camps. Is that the Literacy Brigade? Go ahead.
People learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing.
Yes. Good job, Democrats. Good job. Now, Marxist or democratic socialist, oh, sounds so nice here. They'll never tell you what their programs cost. Did Mao waste his time telling you what his programs cost? Stalin? Did they want Castro? Chavez, Maduro? They're not. How much do your programs cost? What, are you kidding? We're transforming society. We're changing everything. Who cares what they cost? We don't have to sit here with a sharp pencil and figure out what these things cost. It's not what we're about. We're not about costs. We're about destruction. We call it transformation. Bernie, how much do your programs cost? Cut 18, go.
There's also free public college, cancellation of all student debt, a federal job guarantee, and a Green New Deal to rapidly reduce carbon emissions.
How much will that cost?
Obviously, those are expensive propositions, but we have done our best on issue after issue in paying for them.
Do you know how much, though? I mean, do you have a price tag for all of this?
We do. I mean, the price tag is... It will be substantially less than letting the current system go. I think it's about $30 trillion.
That's just
no, that's not correct. $92 trillion. He's off by a factor of 3. But who cares? Did Mao care? Did Stalin care? Did they care in Cuba? No. Go ahead.
Medicare for all
do you have a price tag for all of these things?
No, I don't. We try to. No, you mentioned making public colleges and universities tuition free and canceling all student debt. That's correct. That's what I want to do. We pay for that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation.
But you say you don't know what the total price is, but you know how it's going to be paid for. How do you know it's going to be paid for if you don't know how much the price is?
Well, I can't rattle off to you every nickel and every dime, but we have accounted for it.
Can't rattle off every nickel and dime? How about the closest trillion, you idiot? He doesn't care. It doesn't matter. He wants the system. That's what he cares about. He's an ideologue. He's an ideologue pushing a theory that has resulted in the impoverishment and the death of tens of millions. But he'll do it differently, you see. He'll do it better, as I explained in Ameritopia. We just haven't really tried it yet in the free world. We just really need to give it a shot. Who cares what it costs? And then they throw out the bromide. It'll cost less than what we pay now. We don't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. It doesn't matter. And for the people who support him, it doesn't matter. They want the freebies, free college, get rid of my debt, free health care. I just want what? That's what his supporters are. His supporters aren't the producers. His supporters aren't the people who make this country work. Go ahead.
Talked about Medicare for all. We have options out there that will pay for it.
No, you don't. And you can't even explain them. It doesn't matter what they cost, you see. There'll be debate. Bernie will not be asked a single question about the bigots and anti-Semites with whom he has surrounded himself. The moderators will never use the word Marxist or communist to describe him, even though he is that. They'll mention his support for some Marxists and communists, but they're not going to take the next step. Because the problem is we have a very sick media in this country. By sick, I mean unhealthy. A media that is collectively a propaganda tool of the Democrats. Not even of Bernie Sanders, of the Democrats. Social activism. And they are desperate to defeat Donald Trump.